All right, this is the state of the resource presentation for our group. We did water from Lake Mead, and this is done by Aya, Sarah, Melanie, and Garrett, me. So first we want to talk about geologic history and how it is made. So the history of this great resource and how it's formed is written in the hills, where dry and barren ground is a shallow sea once filled. More than 1 billion years ago, there's a shallow sea stretching across the landscape. Lava flowed, mixed with the sediments, and formed schists and gneiss. A little over 500 million years ago, southern Nevada was covered by a sea encroaching and receding for 250 million years, where Lake Mojave and Lake Mead now rest. Over the next 200 million years, the sea receded, leaving behind shallow rivers, ocean shorelines, and distant volcanoes. Limestone and shale were created by the plants and animals that died while the sea still existed, along with sediment that sunk to the bottom. Just about 17 million years ago, the crust thinned and earthquakes formed natural faults. These widenings caused the mountains to rise and the valleys to fall. This movement in the Earth's crust was caused by volcanic activity around 20 million years ago. This peaked around 15 million years ago with lots of ash and lava in the air. As it ended, water soon followed and flowed in the low-lying areas. The subsequent lakes would overflow and form rivers running in the fractured areas. Lake Mead in itself receives water from the Colorado River and also fed by rainwater. It's also fed by three small tributaries, the Virgin River, the Money River, and the Las Vegas Wash. So, as a whole, Lake Mead has been filling since 1934. It reached capacity, which is around 1221.4 feet, with some slight reductions due to the damming and filling of Lake Powell in July of 1982. This dropped to 1099 feet in 2009, surface area and volume being 89,814 acres and 142,844 400 acre feet, respectively. Compared to full capacity, these numbers are 57% of the area and 49.7% of the volume of what it is at the total.
So now understanding how the indigenous populations have used this water area ranging from the Colorado River down to present-day Lake Mead, we begin to then understand what came after, which was a lot of westward expansion and this hope of creating more resources so that people can continue to expand and develop. And so this question arises of how do we do the same thing? How can we utilize water resources to find success? And we often think about this in our history of expansion as building, as creating something new. And so we see that with the Reclamation Act of 1902, where the national government begins to see water as something that users can pay for so that they can continue to develop. This ultimately led to the creation of the Hoover Dam in 1936, which then created Lake Mead as a consequence at its base. And as of 1964, Lake Mead became declared a recreation center, it was actually the first national recreation center and really contributed to the definition of what national recreation means for this country. Recreation ranged from boating, swimming, all of these classic water recreation things we think of today really had their start and foundation here at Lake Mead. And in 1983, water loss begins. And so we see kind of a change and altering of this resource, more conservation, etc. And currently, this resource is used for electricity, serving California, which is about 50% of the energy, Nevada, Arizona, and Mexico. It is also used for municipal water. So we have so many people depending on it that can be in the local area and a little beyond. Drinking water and agriculture irrigation is something it provides to over 20 million people across 7 states. And today we're also seeing with this lower level of water, we have some limited recreation, but a redefinition of recreation to include kind of observing and exploring these old ruins that are beginning to surface of the town of St. Thomas and shipwrecks of World War II.
So, drawing off of the current resource use of the water in Lake Mead, I'm going to talk a little bit more about management rules and policies. So, in 2021, a very notable declaration was formed. It was the first shortage declaration to ever happen for Lake Mead. It was spearheaded by the Secretary of the Interior, and it greatly reduced the amount of water that was made available to people in Nevada and the several other states that use water from Lake Mead, including California and Arizona. The drought only worsened the following year. So in 2022, a two-tier shortage was declared. This was a much more widespread shortage and limited the amount of available water by 8.1 billion gallons, which obviously caused a big hit to a lot of major cities in the area like Las Vegas, as well as a lot of agricultural communities, which rely on Lake Mead water. The Southern Nevada Water Authority adopted mandatory conservation measures as well after the drought worsened. Some things that were included in this were strict watering schedules for people in neighboring communities. So you can only water your lawns every other week on very specific days to make sure that the water isn't being overused. And then there are strict grass watering bans for decorative grass. This is grass in places like medians in the road, grass surrounding parking lots, things like that, just because it took up a lot of unnecessary water use from Lake Mead. The Seven States Agreement was a big agreement signed in 2007 between Arizona, California, and Nevada to store conserved water in Lake Mead. So this kind of allocates portions of Lake Mead's water to those different states. And notably, California has not received any federal water cuts yet, but Nevada and Arizona have. This is mostly because California is the biggest agricultural producing state in the country. So the federal government is a little more hesitant to cut their water usage because of their agricultural needs. In 2012, there was also something called Minute 319, which was signed between the US and Mexico, and it actually gives Mexico rights to Lake Mead's water as well. This dates back to about the 1940s when the US was in agreement with Mexico over using Colorado River Basin water. So that's kind of carried through today. And that's another reason that Lake Mead is losing some of its water because it's also being sent to Mexico. But Minute 319 does state that with worse droughts, they will send less water to Mexico. So it's kind of a give and take sort of situation. Okay, moving on. The future of Lake Mead under the current management policies is pretty bleak from what I found. So the lake currently supplies 25 million people with water. That's a lot of people for a lake that is losing water very quickly. There's also an upper level weather pattern in the west, and this just basically means that it brings a lot of dry weather and not a lot of rain. So places in California and Nevada have been seeing that in recent years. Not a lot of rain, a lot of really hot, dry weather. That really doesn't help the already drying out lake. So climate scientists think that this will only worsen with climate change and rising global temperatures, which is not a good sign for Lake Mead. Also, in the Colorado River Compact that was signed a century ago, there was too much water allocated to the different states involved in the compact. They kind of miscalculated the flow of the river, and development in areas like Las Vegas and surrounding communities outpaced the flow of the Colorado River and therefore led to massive water.
All right, so a reflection on the historical uses and the current state of the resource. So this resource has been open to public utility for outdoor recreation, including water sports, kayaking, and sport fishing in the past. In 1935 and the next subsequent 7 years, U.S. Fish and Wildlife released largemouth bass, black crappie, bluegill, and green sunfish. In 1954, threadfin shad was added to act as a food source for these larger fish. Largemouth populations decreased due to the fluctuation in water levels. Striped bass, as well as silver salmon and some different trouts, were added in 1969 due to the decline in largemouth populations. Rainbow trout was later added. Sadly, through the years, the native razorback suckers have been outcompeted and populations are on the decline. Currently, fishing brings in millions of dollars, which helps with conservation and preservation. Lake Mead is one of the most important water sources for Los Angeles and as mentioned on the website, the United States. The state of Lake Mead currently is not great. While the rainstorms have slightly helped replenish some of the water, the lake is still lower than desired. It needs to be conserved.
So, with climate change comes drought, and with drought comes management strategies. In this case, conservation is the main one, which is limiting wasteful use of the water in Lake Mead. and these efforts come from federal, local, and state governments. So, for example, in terms of a federal effort, Joe Biden has provided funding for the conservation of water in all of the Colorado River Basin. And then also the Federal Bureau of Reclamation has asked states to limit their water consumption by 2 to 4 million acre feet. Um, Also, then in terms of state and local governments, they're largely kind of promoting this conservation among the public and individuals. So, for example, including water smart landscaping instead of grass in front yards, and also enforcing a watering schedule to limit water use. And then two smaller ideas regarding management is the idea of cooperation, needing to cooperate with Native American tribes of the area as well as Mexico. And then also this idea of recognizing as individuals that those around Lake Mead are part of this water basin and they kind of have this responsibility to it, similar to being a citizen and part of the state or the country. You have this kind of responsibility. Since the lake was not natural and it was actually man-made by the dams, I'm going to talk about the Native American relationships with the Colorado River before the dams. Um, and I couldn't find much information on how the Native Americans impacted the river, and more so just how the river provided for the Native Americans. So prior to the dam being built along the Colorado River, Native American tribes such as the Mojave and Navajo used floodplain agriculture, which is where the agriculture syncs up with the flood cycles of the river. And once that river floods, the soil that's left is really nutrient rich and can help the crops grow really fast. And then the Native Americans also use the river for fish. And since the river provides water not only to Native Americans but also to animals, it was a large area where game could be hunted. And so, with the dam being created and creating the lake, there was a flooding of tribal lands that kind of washed away a large history that existed. And sometimes, as the level has actually gone down, some more discoveries have been made. But a lot of the history did get washed away with the dam being created. And then after the dam, so current day, tribes still hold a large amount of water rights for the Colorado River. And also, they're definitely a part of the conversations being had about management strategies with Lake Mead and how that resource is being used.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how increasing population and climate change has impacted the water resource in Lake Mead. So as mentioned earlier, Lake Mead supplies drinking water and water for agriculture irrigation to California, Nevada, Arizona, and Mexico. The growing population in these states also require a growing water supply, which means an increasing number of pipes and pumps drawing water out from the reservoir. At the same time, climate change has shifted weather patterns. The Colorado River, Lake Mead's main water source, is experiencing drought, reducing the downstream release to Lake Mead. So also with reduced precipitation and higher temperature caused by climate change, moisture evaporates before it can reach larger bodies of water, further reducing the water supply Lake Mead gets. With these reasons, more water is run out of Lake Mead than the amount it gets, resulting in the lake's water level to drop to 1,059 feet in May of 2022, leaving Lake Mead only at its 30% capacity. Some of the barriers stopping the best practice from being implemented are both political and social reasons. As mentioned before, Lake Mead supplies water to California, Arizona, and Nevada, and every state and its water agencies want to protect their own interests, so no one wants to give up their water supply. So a drought contingency plan that's based on the 2007 rule and would require the 3 states to cut their Lake Mead allocation during times of shortage. Although the 3 states had agreed on the framework of this drought plan, there are more internal issues within the states regarding who has control of water. And it's hard to get all 3 states to agree on it, as it will affect the amount of water supply they each get, which leads into the social reasons. So the increasing population in each state require a higher demand of water, and to reduce the water supply means a change in people's lifestyle, which can cause some disagreements. So that's it for our presentation on water resources from Lake Mead. Thank you for watching.